You want to hear something that's going to blow your mind? $1 million in profit from less than 6,000 Instagram followers. What I want to walk you through is a story of a business owner that I just recently met doing those exact numbers from a tiny audience and what you can use from those strategies for yourself to get started making big money, even if you have a small audience.
I had the most insane thing happen last night, and it has had me at a loss for words. I was actually at a loss for words, like speechless, befuddled, bewildered. And I was like, what is going on? And it took a concept that I kind of believe in, and I've made some moves around it. And it took it to the absolute hyperbolic extreme that you could imagine. And it still held true. And I think that for business owners who are listening to this, for people who make content who are listening to this, but just in this is going to, I mean, it has slightly nudged how I see the world, and I'll just put it that way. And I feel like a lot of the beliefs that I have around the world are still relatively. I hold on. I believe them pretty strongly. So here's what happened. So we had a company come in, and the lady who owns the company is a registered dietitian, and I'm not going to shout her. I would shout her out because I want her to get all the kudos in the world, but I don't want it to mess up what she's doing. And so that's why I'm going to keep it anonymous. So she's a registered dietitian. She takes home just under $1 million a year helping other registered dietitians bill insurance correctly. And so it's super niche in terms of what she's really good at. So she knows how to be an RD and help people bill insurance codes properly. And so the average I think a dietitian adds like $100,000 in income using just like her kind of coding system for billing them, right? Crazy niche, crazy niche. And so I spent some time with her. We talked about her business, some things. I was like, hey, I think if you move this stuff around, and I think that the business could probably do about $3 million a year to $5 million a year in profit if she just moves some of the things around that we talked about. And so I was like, cool, this is great. And so we had dinner, and I was like, hey, let me see your Instagram. So I just wanted to pull it up because I was going to make a point about something, because I assumed that she had, like, I wanted to see what kind of content she had. I assumed that she had at least a relatively large following. I honestly hadn't looked. Shame on me. And this is what happens. I pull it up. Number one, her account is not verified. And I'm like, this is your number one source of income and you are not paying $14.99 a month. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And after yelling at her for that, I was drawn to the next natural, absolutely unbelievable thing that I'm going to say to you. She had 5,800 followers. Her average post got 19 likes and like one comment. And 100% of her acquisition came from her organic Instagram with just under 6,000 followers. I pulled up her account stats because I was losing my mind seeing the amount of sales that she was making off of this account. Her reach for 30 days of her account was 2,800. That was her reach, 2,800. Like, for context, I do about 20 million a month. Context. And I was like, what is happening right now? Like, what is going on? How is this possible? And so she's doing 10 plus sales a day at a low ticket price and doing 3-ish sales a week at a higher ticket price. And when I say higher ticket, I'm talking like, $4,000 or $5,000 type price point. And then a lower ticket thing for just like some cheat sheets of like, here's all the codes and this is how you can do them, whatever. And a 10 a day. Okay. And so that's the big story. Now I'm going to zoom out and I'm going to say what I think is so cool about this. So she says this, and I was like, how are you doing this? And she was like, you know what? I got my first sale when I had 8 people on my email list. 8. And I was like, that's nuts. And she was like, yeah. So it was really confirming for me that like there's people were listening. And so I was like, well, how big is your email list now? And she's been doing this for a few years. I told 2,900 people on her email list. And she makes sales from emails. And it was such a great reset for me. It was such a good nudge as a reminder that the view count you have on the other side, the 19 likes, like there's a real person on the other side of this that is watching your clip that has 5 views. There's a real person who's opening up your emails when you have a list that has 300 people on it. Like, people are watching, people are listening. And the thing that was unique that I found about her, I'll say two things, and I think that there's a really good meta concept here. One is her content was consistent, and she said, yeah, I do one post and I do one story every day. And I like, but she was like super proud of it. I was like, this is adorable and also crazy. But the posts that she talks about, 100% of them are about billing insurance as a registered dietitian. Like, could not be more niche. You couldn't even think of one, right? Maybe I couldn't even imagine one. And despite that, she's making the sales that she is. And so I'm going to zoom out on this because I think it's really interesting. So if you go to Alex's homepage, right, like as a user of Instagram, my user page, I've showed this to people because people are like, this is really weird. All I have is philosophy stuff, comedy, and gym equipment. Like, that's my whole feed. I have no news. It's philosophy, comedy, and gym equipment because that's what I look at. And what's interesting is that the philosophy is a lot of those are kind of like mid-size. The comedians are mass market, so a lot of those guys are bigger. But I get tiny comedians, like 5,000 follower, 10,000 follower comedians get shown to me all the time because Instagram knows I like comedy. And equipment dealers and equipment manufacturers and metal fabricators, not always the best marketers. And so like these accounts that I follow there have like 500, 1,000, like 2,000, like they're not huge accounts. But I get served everything in that space on Instagram because that's what I'm into. And so I think that there's a couple of really interesting things here. One is that I think that niche content will make you a hell of a lot more money if that's what you're actually selling. And here's the thing, I have learned this lesson twice. So I like to pretend that I'm, I like to think I'm a fancy businessman who learns all these lessons. But I have messed this up 2 times, not 2 times. And so I tell the story about how my podcast was getting, 2,000-3,000 downloads per month, which is like 100 downloads an episode. Not a lot, right? And that was for like a few years. But I don't tell you this other part of the story, which is that my podcast started growing in numbers when I started talking about general business. It also started growing in numbers even faster once we sold the company for Gym Launch. But there was a period of about 18 months prior to me selling where I just talked about general business because I was like, I'm tired of talking about gyms. I just want to talk about business in general. During that period of time, our organic sales went to basically 0. And it took us like 6 months to figure out that the reason that had happened was because I stopped talking about gym shit. And gym owners were like less interested in my content than generic business content. And that makes sense. Like if you're a business owner, you're going to listen to business stuff in general. If you're a dentist, then you're going to get a lot out of a dentist only podcast, right? But there's not that many dentists, so you're not going to get a lot of listens, but the listens in terms of relevancy is going to be through the roof. And so we started making less sales, but I was getting more views, more listens, right? Now I ended up wanting to go in that direction, so it was fine. And I'm talking about general business now, right? I made that mistake the second time, not necessarily a mistake, we learned, right? 3 to 6 months ago, we were like, let's experiment with some wider content. And by experimenting with wider content, we sure as hell got more views, more a bunch of other vanity metrics. But the number of business owners that was watching, and the way I measured that was our CPMs on our videos on YouTube, the amount of people who opt in at acquisition.com, people who buy our books, all of those metrics were actually down despite our views being up. And so this little story that I have of the dinner that I had last night blew me away because it just showed how much you can really make if you have a diehard audience that doesn't need to be big. Less than 6,000 followers. Her account reaches less than 2,800 accounts per month, and she's taking home almost $1 million a year. That's income, not revenue. I'm just talking profit. And right now, if she just makes the couple of obvious changes that she can make, she'll probably make somewhere in the $3 to $5 million a year range. Income.